now what is this? You wanted an elephant? An elephant. You got to be kidding me. You want an elephant? Okay, so for Christmas you want an... All right, now... Okay, so well, welcome, folks. I'm Jeff Williams, your host of Star Oasis. Our staff and I here, I'll tell you, we got a really great staff here. You know, they are incredible when it comes to their dedication for research, for videography, and putting this fine show together. And again, I want to welcome you. And we were having a discussion before the show that of what everybody wanted for Christmas. And I know you're saying, "What? Easter's tomorrow. Why are you thinking about Christmas?" Well, our producer, Dallas Pearson, told me that he wants an elephant, an African king elephant, a jumbo elephant, along with the truck to pull it in. I think I know what he's up to. I think what he really wants to do is get this elephant and then give that or sell it to the Minnesota Zoo so he can keep the truck. Our intern, Andrew, he is looking for an Academy Award. I think he's got to go out and earn that one. And then occasionally we get Tim Kinley, who has a show on Thursday. That Tim, he has come in and assisted us on many occasions. And Tim said that he wants to be the Supreme Judicial Overlord, essentially the one guy who watches all the judges. I think that's a little tall tale. I might not be able to make that happen, guys. But there are 264 days until Christmas, so at least we got some time to work that out. In the meantime, we have one more day until Easter. Easter is coming tomorrow. Well, anyhow, we're going to have a really great show today, at least I think. We've been planning this now for the last 2 weeks. I want to lead off mentioning our staff because Dallas and Andrew and Tim, they've been really, really great in providing a lot of information. And Dallas even went out early this morning. He got up at like 5 a.m. to shoot some video, and then he went back to bed for a couple of hours. I don't blame him. And then still managed to get everything all packaged for today's show. So we've really got a great, dedicated staff. He and Andrew and I have exchanged emails on content. So we do a lot of show prep during the week in order to synthesize everything and give it into a nice, complete package for you to understand, because there's a lot of complex issues out there. There are a lot of things that end up getting all kind of jumbled together. And unless you unwind them and piece them back together the way they should, things don't always seem to fit. And one of the things about this show is we're always trying to show you the bigger picture. That while you're looking at one slice of something, that there's other slices that are companion pieces. And that's kind of what today's show is about. One important thing happened this week, and this is what we've been discussing the last probably 6 weeks now with the whole Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, speaking before Congress. There was a big deal about what happened in Switzerland with the Iranian nuclear talks. And, okay, so our producer is checking something out.
Making sure the teleprompter's on.
Oh, he's making sure that he can send me messages through our teleprompter. Okay, well, thank you. You can. In the meantime, as soon as he gets back to his station, we're going to play you a clip about the Iran framework agreement and how it's triggering both caution and celebration. Major news issue this week that you're going to hear about all over the place, including here.
Agreement with Iran poured in from all over the Middle East and across the political spectrum in the United States. They were dancing in Tehran streets into the early morning hours.
I haven't made any big progress in 10 years. We are very happy that we can finally go forward. It's a real victory for us.
Later, at Friday prayers with Iran's chief nuclear official on hand, a top cleric lauded the agreement.
I should really congratulate all the gentlemen who led the nuclear talks. Great job. President of America and all of you who are on the other side, you have made a deal with Iran, and within the framework of that agreement, Iran will observe all it has committed itself to and will keep its end of the deal.
That was a possible signal that Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei and his hardline cadre will ultimately accept the deal. Essentially, the framework calls for curtailing Iran's uranium enrichment capacity for up to 15 years and requiring intensive new inspections in exchange for sanctions being lifted. In a televised address, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani said his government will do what it promises, but he rejected President Obama's contention that the sanctions force the issue.
They imposed sanctions to make us surrender, but when they realized that surrendering was impossible and found themselves facing a united, integrated, and brave nation, then they said the sanctions were intended for negotiations.
The Iranian leader also declared the world powers that signed the deal, quote, accept that uranium can be enriched in Iran. Still, he said, the program poses no threat.
We want better relations with countries we have cold relations with. The enrichment and technology will not be used in any country, no regional country, or any in the world.
Those words did nothing to mollify leaders in Jerusalem.
The deal would legitimize Iran's illegal nuclear program.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu had spoken with President Obama overnight, who sought to reassure him, but to little apparent effect.
Israel will not accept an agreement which allows a country that vows to annihilate us to develop nuclear weapons, period. In addition, Israel demands that any final agreement with Iran will include a clear and unambiguous Iranian commitment of Israel's right to exist.
The White House insisted today the president would not accept an agreement that threatens Israel. And State Department spokesperson Marie Harf said the president is satisfied that the administration did not concede too much.
We need to cut off the 4 pathways for Iran to get to a nuclear weapon, and we need to get Iran from currently 2 to 3 months of breakout time up to 6 times that, so to a year, at least a year breakout time under this agreement. And that's what we have done. Our bottom lines here in terms of what we needed to get at the negotiating table have never changed.
Other parties to the talks struck notes of caution. The French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius insisted a final agreement must ensure there is no Iranian bomb.
If this agreement is not entirely solid, that would mean that Iran could get a bomb, and this is unacceptable. And if this agreement is not perceived as solid, that means that the countries of the region, such as Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, and others, could also start thinking of making a bomb. And that would mean a nuclear proliferation, dangerous for all.
There is no specific schedule on resumption of talks, which have a deadline of June 30th.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, came and warned us about. He said they may get a bomb. And if we don't believe the Iranian government on other things, then why should we believe them when they say that we're going to abide by all the rules when we don't believe them on other things? So just something to consider here. But now let's take a look at the White House reaction and President Obama, what he has to say about this deal.
US President Barack Obama says the outline agreement struck in Switzerland is a good deal and will stop Tehran obtaining a nuclear weapon, but he's warning that it could still collapse.
Our work is not yet done. The deal has not been signed. Between now and the end of June, the negotiators will continue to work through the details of how this framework will be fully implemented, and those details matter. If there is backsliding on the part of the Iranians, if the verification and inspection mechanisms don't meet the specifications of our nuclear and security experts, there will be no deal. But if we can get this done, and Iran follows through on the framework that our negotiators agreed to, we will be able to resolve one of the greatest threats to our security and to do so peacefully.
So now the question is, what's going to happen long term? Short term, is this just President Obama's way of saying, all right, we're going to look the other way while Iran stockpiles nuclear weapons or nuclear weapon capabilities? Or is this actually a legitimate agreement? Only time will tell. So I'm not here to say one way or the other, but I will, mention the fact that, we're going to be watching this very, very closely in the next few years. One of the questions that comes up is, can we actually reimpose sanction if it fails? And the answer is yes, but it's not going to be an easy thing to do if anything has to go back through the United Nations Security Council, because you have China and Russia are still permanent security Security Council is the word I'm looking for. There's still Security Council members who have, the veto threats. and just as much as France, England, and the United States do. So can we just unilaterally say, oh, we're going to reimpose it? Yeah, we could, but if the process requires more United Nations action, it might take a lot longer. But then I'm also reminded of what happened when we had the oversight of weapons of mass destructions in Iraq, when we actually had inspectors in there. A lot of inspectors who got snookered. So are we just reinventing the wheel and is history repeating itself with Iran, the very same type of cycle that we saw with Iraq? Again, we don't have enough time to determine which way this is going to go. I'm just merely throwing this argument out there for something to think about. But I have one other question. Is this something that perhaps may have actually been foretold to us? Let's take a look at the next film clip.
We are in the most amazing time in the history of the Bible. The skies have always biblically given us a hint of what's going to happen. Since the time of Jesus, for these 4 blood moons to fall on the biblical feast has only happened 7 times. 7 is the number of perfection, completion. This next one will be 8. 8 is the number of new beginnings. 8 is the number of man living above the natural. Man living above the norm. Supernatural. Every time.
And it seems we were having a little bit of technical difficulty there, but you got the picture, I hope, that this morning was a lunar eclipse. It is the 3rd of the blood moon tetrad, where there's 4 full moons in eclipse in a row 6 months apart. And that's the significance of what happened this morning. The blood moon tetrad. This is the 3rd in a series of 4 moons in a row. And this is only the 8th time since the year 0, or actually the year 1, there was no year 0, that this has actually occurred. There have been, I believe, 62 tetrads throughout history. Some of those had included partial eclipses. Let's just take a quick look here at some of the facts that are coming out. This is put out by USA Today newspaper on what to expect on today's eclipse. Well, that was a short video. Actually, NASA had produced that video. USA Today had actually just put their logo on that video. And if we had a little bit more prep time, we probably would have just put the Star Oasis logo on top of that one. But that's just to show you that, hey, this was coming. When we originally planned this episode of today's show, we'd actually been looking at this for the last couple of weeks. We wanted to do a blood moon tetrad show. And the thing is, none of us on our production staff, well, we all had one minor oversight in the last couple of weeks. That was, we all thought it was going to be after the show tonight to give you a preview of what's coming, not actually having happened before the show. And so you're going to see a little bit here on a preview, even though the event had just passed. But nonetheless, You know, we want to take a closer look as to whether or not this is part of prophecy or not, and to see what others have to say. Now let's just take a close look here at the science behind what a lunar eclipse is. I remember when I was right out of high school, I was working for Sears, and there was one night when I was walking on Upper Afton Road. I was walking east, and I was about ready to come down to McKnight Road, and there in front of me at apogee was this huge moon and a lunar eclipse, and I thought it was absolutely beautiful to watch. But I didn't really understand anything about prophecy and eclipses and blood moons. So with the passage of time, you kind of figure that kind of stuff out. So here's a look from something NASA put together on what exactly a lunar eclipse is.
A tetrad of lunar eclipses, presented by Science at NASA. For people in the United States, an extraordinary series of lunar eclipses is about to begin. The action starts on April 15th, when the full moon passes through the amber shadow of Earth, producing a midnight eclipse visible across North America. That night marks the beginning of a lunar eclipse tetrad, a series of 4 consecutive total eclipses occurring at 6-month intervals. The total eclipse of April 15, 2014 will be followed by another on October 8, 2014, and another on April 4, 2015, and another on September 28, 2015. The most unique thing about the 2014-2015 tetrad is that all of them are visible for all or parts of the USA, says longtime NASA eclipse expert Fred Espenak. On average, lunar eclipses occur about twice a year, but not all of them are total. There are 3 types. A penumbral eclipse is when the moon passes through the pale outskirts of Earth's shadow. It's so subtle, skywatchers often don't notice an eclipse is underway. A partial eclipse is more dramatic. The moon dips into the core of Earth's shadow, but not all the way, so only a fraction of the moon is darkened. A total eclipse, when the entire moon is shadowed, is best of all. The face of the moon turns sunset red for up to an hour or more as the eclipse slowly unfolds. Usually, lunar eclipses come in no particular order. A partial can be followed by a total, followed by a penumbral, and so on. Anything goes. Occasionally, though, the sequence is more orderly. When 4 consecutive lunar eclipses are all total, the series is called a tetrad. During the 21st century, there are 9 sets of tetrads, so I would describe tetrads as a frequent occurrence in the current pattern of lunar eclipses, says Espenak. But this has not always been the case. During the 300-year interval from 1600 to 1900, for instance, there were no tetrads at all. The April 15th eclipse begins at 2 a.m. Eastern Time, when the edge of the moon first enters the amber core of Earth's shadow. Totality occurs during a 78-minute interval, beginning around 3 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, midnight on the West Coast. Weather permitting, the red moon will be easy to see across the entirety of North America. Why red? A quick trip to the moon provides the answer. Imagine yourself standing on a dusty lunar plain looking up at the sky. Overhead hangs Earth, night side down, completely hiding the sun behind it. The eclipse is underway. You might expect Earth seen in this way to be utterly dark, but it's not. The rim of the planet seems to be on fire. As you scan your eye around Earth's circumference, you're seeing every sunrise and every sunset in the world, all of them, all at once. This incredible light beams into the heart of Earth's shadow, filling it with a coppery glow and transforming the moon into a great red orb. Mark your calendar for April 15th and let the tetrad begin. For more rare occurrences in the night sky, stay tuned to science.nasa.gov.
Well, it looks like this year the best place and time to view the lunar eclipse was, as you're going to see in the next clip, was over the Pacific Ocean. So if you were in California, you probably had a pretty good view. If you were in Hawaii, you had an excellent view. If you were in Guam, you probably even had a better view. But if you're in Minnesota, you had a view if you were up at the crack of dawn this morning, as our producer was. But we're going to take a look right now more as to the charts for where today's eclipse was.
The next total eclipse of the moon, on Saturday, April 4th, will be the third in the current tetrad of 4 in a row at half-year intervals. As was the case last October 8th, this weekend's lunar eclipse favors Westerners in the United States and Canada. As once again most will need to look low in the west as dawn brightens, lower, in fact, than last time. But in another way it will be different. This weekend's eclipse will be just barely total. In fact, you may get the impression that it never becomes quite total at all. The moon's north-northeastern limb squeaks so slightly inside the umbra of Earth's shadow that it will remain much brighter than the deep red we can expect across the rest of the moon's face. The map, diagram, and timetable here show what to expect at your location and when. Weather permitting, those near the west coast will see the total phase of the eclipse with the moon fairly high in a dark sky before dawn even begins. Sky watchers in the plain states will find dawn brightening and the moon sinking low in the west around totality. For Easterners, the moon sets, and the sun rises, during the partial phase before totality begins. New England misses this one altogether. Meanwhile, as seen from Hawaii or New Zealand, the eclipse happens deep in the night and high in the sky. For Australia, Japan, China, and Southeast Asia, it comes on Saturday evening local time.
Now, I remember a year ago when I first heard about the blood moon tetrad, and it was the first night. Now, if you recall last winter, it was very, very brittle cold. And it just seemed that the cold lasted practically until July. That's how it felt. I mean, I was so frigid, frozen cold in December and January and February. I don't think I really started to warm up until mid-July. We were after the 4th of July and I still felt cold. And I remember being outside watching the first of the blood moons last year in April, and it was a very cold night. I was actually at a Perkins restaurant doing some work on the computer, and I was actually trying to photograph it, and my hands froze. I had to have gloves on, and the wind was out, and this morning was probably a little bit warmer than last year, but not that very warm, because our producer was out, sitting out in the cold this morning, videotaping this morning's blood moon for the blood moon tetrad, just so you could see it on North Star Oasis. And it sounds like a nice spring morning right here inside the studio. But that was what our producer had put together this morning. And I have to really commend Dallas Pearson for getting out there and taking his time to get that footage for you. But now the question now is, what is the significance of the blood moon tetrad as it relates to prophecy and Israel and Scripture? There was a couple of books published a few years back that state that of the previous 7 things happened with Israel. Now, some people say that yes, this is the truth. This is prophecy. This is part of prophecy. Others say no, it really isn't. That the people who wrote the books and perpetuated the theories have a few things off. So we're going to take an examination on both of them. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of background on some of the things that happened before we play the next clip. They mentioned that all of these, the origination of the theory was looking at 5,000 years of data provided by NASA. And so this goes 2,000 years BC to 3,000 years AD. And so we're sitting in 2015 AD. There's still almost a whole century left, whole millennium left to go before we hit that 5,000 year mark. And there of the 4 total lunar eclipses that occurred on the Jewish Passover and the Feast of the Tabernacles, which are the 2 places in the blood moon tetrad. The first one they mark is in 162 to 163 AD, and it coincided with the worst persecution of the Jews and Christians in the history of the Roman Empire. Within 3 years, the Antonine plague killed 8 million people, a third of the population. 795, 796, that tetrad. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred on the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur holidays, while King Charlemagne of the Holy Roman Empire established a buffer zone between France and Spain, ending centuries of Arab invasions into Western Europe. And I will also mention that King Charlemagne is my 33rd great-grandfather, so way to go to Charlemagne. Moving up in the next set, 842 to 843 AD. Shortly after the eclipses, the Vatican Church in Rome was attacked and looted by an Islamic invasion from Africa. And then in 860 and 61, shortly after the eclipses, the Byzantine Empire defeated Arab armies at the Battle of Lalakan, I don't speak Turkish, in Turkey, and permanently stopped the Islamic invasion of Eastern Europe. Then there was a long period of time, I believe 655 years, between the 861 and the 1493 tetrad. As you can see on the screen, 493, 494, well, what are 1493, 1494? What happened the year before, and that was King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella had ordered all Jewish people to leave the country, and that was also when Columbus came over to what we now call America. And he had gone to the island of Hispaniola, which is now separated between the countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But then we jump back another 400 and something years to 1949, 1950, and that was when we had the first Arab-Israeli War for Independence, and that is also right after the State of Israel was created, or the country of Israel. It had proclaimed its independence on May 14th, 1948. Less than 24 hours later, the regular armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq invaded the country, forcing Israel to defend the sovereignty it had regained in its ancestral homeland, in what became known as Israel's War of Independence. The newly formed, poorly equipped Israeli Defense Force repulsed the invaders in fierce intermittent fighting, which lasted some 15 months and claimed over 6,000 Israeli lives, nearly 1% of the country's Jewish population at the time. And then up to 1967, 1968, We had the Six-Day War when Israel recaptured Jerusalem. As Israel's neighbors prepared to destroy the Jewish state, Israel invoked its inherent right of self-defense, launching a preemptive strike on the 5th of June of 1967 against Egypt in the south. It was followed by a counterattack against Jordan in the east and the routing of Syrian forces entrenched on the Golan Heights in the north. At the end of the 6 days of fighting, previous ceasefire lines were replaced by new ones, with Judea, Samaria, Gaza, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights under Israel's control. As a result, the northern villages were freed from 19 years of recurrent Syrian shelling. The passage of Israeli and Israel-bound shipping through the Straits of Tiran was ensued, and Jerusalem, which had been divided under Israeli and Jordanian rule since 1949, was reunified under Israel's authority. So there might be some plausibility to this. I'm not going to completely discount it. I am a strong believer in biblical prophecy, but I am also very skeptical whenever I do read what man writes in interpreting what he believes as prophecy. Because the thing is, in the end times, we're all going to know what happens. So this is where it could be true. They could be onto something. I'm not going to say that it's completely a farce, but the one question I do have is how come the Holocaust was not predicated with a blood moon tetrad? We had, 6 million Jews lost their lives with Adolf Hitler's Third Reich. That wasn't predicated in this. But there seems to be enough plausibility here. Let's take a look at the next clip, because we're actually going to have the person who had decoded the blood moon tetrad prophecy theory, and he's going to be on in this next clip.
As they say in astronomy, check your local listings. A good astronomy website will tell you if you can see the rare event as tonight gives way to tomorrow morning. In some places, it's going to be possible to view an eclipse of the moon and the rising sun at the same time. It takes careful watching of both horizons.
And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh.
Well, they could be just really beautiful cosmological events, or are they tied to biblical prophecy? Today is the first of 4 blood moon eclipses, rare occurrences that some biblical scholars say signal earth-shattering events, particularly when they happen around the Jewish high holy days. So what can this blood moon be telling us? Mark Biltz is a pastor and author of the book Blood Moons, Decoding the Eminent Heavenly Signs, and he joins me now from Seattle. Welcome, Pastor.
Well, hi. Thank you so much for having me on.
So tell us exactly what blood moons are.
A blood moon simply is a total lunar eclipse as compared to a partial lunar eclipse.
And what does it look like in the sky? I'm assuming it looks red. That's why we call it a blood moon.
Right, exactly. The longer light rays are red that go around the atmosphere of the Earth and reflect on the moon when it's in the Earth's shadow.
And now you say that this is something that signals a biblical prophecy. Is that right? Am I getting that right? Or it just signals something large that's going to happen, significant that's going to happen?
Yes, I believe it's not necessarily going to happen on the day of the eclipse, but in the Bible. In Genesis 1:14, God created the sun and the moon, it says, for signals on basically Passover, on his feast days, his appointed times. So for me, if that's what the Bible says, that we need to be watching when those events happen.
Now, we've had these 4 blood moons, which is a tetrad, which is 4 occurring in a specific a period of time. This has happened before, right?
Over the last 2,000 years, there's been 62 tetrads, but only 8 times have they occurred on the biblical holidays. And in the last 3 of those, they've had great significance for the nation of Israel.
What has happened before, and when did those things happen?
Sure. The last time you had these 4 blood moons on Passover and Tabernacles within a year and a half was 1967 when Israel captured Jerusalem. And the time before that was right after they became a nation in 48. Right before that was in 1493 and 94 during the times of the Spanish Inquisition.
When will the next one happen on the High Holy Day?
It'll be on the Feast of Tabernacles, I believe October 8th of this year, and then again on Passover next year, and then again on the Feast of Tabernacles in 2015. And what's incredible about that one, that's like the grand finale that will be seen in Jerusalem on the Feast of Tabernacles when all the Jews are outside looking up at the sky, and it will be a supermoon. This is going to be a supermoon. The moon will be at perigee, or its closest point to Earth, for the entire year.
What could be the signal here? What is, if this is a signal of something, what could God be telling us?
Well, I think over this next year and a half, how I kind of see these 4 blood moons in a row is going to be a signal from the book of Joel, where it talks about the moon turning to blood. It's in the context of God judging the nations that are trying to divide the land of Israel. So for me, I think this could be a heavenly warning sign to Israel not to divide their land, as well as to the nations, that God may judge those who are trying to divide their land, which is exactly what the big push is.
You know, one of the stories I saw online about the blood moons, the 4 blood moons, said, you know, could it be the end of the world? Is this Judgment Day? Is this, you know, the apocalypse and all of that? Is that what we're looking at here, or should we see something a little more earthbound?
A little more earthbound. I don't think it's the end of the world at all. I'm not into that mentality. I believe that we're going to be around for a long time. But I do believe what this is signaling is a couple of things. One of them, when you look at the pattern, and I like to stay with the science. I mean, I don't control an eclipse. I don't control the calendar, and I'm not the one who wrote the scriptures. I'm just connecting the dots and saying, based scientifically on past patterns, it meant a war with Israel in 48. It meant a war with Israel in 67. There's a probability that we could be looking at a war in Israel, as well as the economy crashing when you look at past statistics.
I mean, it's obvious that a lot of things are just normal occurring patterns. I mean, and if this happens, if something big happens, you can always say, oh, it's the 4 blood moons, of course, we should have seen it coming. But there's so many tumultuous things happening in the world today. I mean, it could be nothing. I mean, it could just mean, well, there's 4 blood moons. And are we making too much out of it? Are we trying to connect the dots too much?
Well, all I'm trying to say is that God is the one who said he created the sun and the moon to send signals on his feast days. Now, I jokingly tell everyone that we are truly a non-profit ministry, and I'm not prophesying anything's going to happen. But at the same time, I think I see these as a warning or red lines that we should be careful and be watching. Not that anything's going to definitely happen, and I would hope nothing does. But I do think that we need to be watching what could be occurring, and not saying, like you said, that something that happens is definitely a sign that was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you remember when the whole math of 2012 happened, and they thought the calendar was going to come to an end. The Aztec sign, that was the Aztec sign.
Right. The Mayans.
The Mayans, right. The Mayan sign, and everybody was looking for some sort of sign, and every little thing that happens, oh, this must be, you know, the 2012. I mean, isn't it possible that we're jumping to conclusions just like that, that nothing will happen that would not have happened if there hadn't been a blood moon?
A great question. The problem is the Mayan calendar isn't the one God was using. So people get all excited about the wrong calendar. The Islamic calendar is based totally on the moon. The calendar that the world uses is based totally on the sun. So they're all on the wrong calendars that God is using. God is using the biblical calendar, which is based on both the sun and the moon. And that's the one that I would be paying attention to. So that's the one I go by.
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting. You talk about the calendars, and this is one of the rare years that the Orthodox Easter and the and Passover begins at the same time. All of these things are sort of converging at the same time. Do you see that as meaning something?
It very well might, but I think what's interesting, to give you an idea how the church in one sense is on the wrong calendar, and this was due to anti-Semitism a couple thousand years ago, in 2 years from now, Easter is a month before Passover. So here we're celebrating the resurrection a month before he even dies.
Very interesting. Well, the book is called Blood Moons, Decoding the Imminent Heavenly Signs. And Pastor Mark Bilt, thank you for being on A Spirited Debate. Very interesting stuff. I'm sure we are going to revisit this as we get more and more of these blood moons coming into fruition.
Now I'm going to read Genesis 1, chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, because he cites chapter 1, verse 14, but I think it's important to see the larger context as far as at least the entire block of text, so that way we can make a more accurate, I hate to say accurate because there's so much subjectivity to this, but a better context to which everything is delivered. And if our producer wouldn't mind, go ahead and pull the computer up onto the screen. And he's rolling his chair over. And here we go. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years, and let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. God set them in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth, to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the fourth day. So, yes, he did mention, at least in the scriptural text, this is a New International Version, by the way, that God, to serve as signs to mark sacred times. So, yes, there might be something to that. Then let's also take a look at Acts chapter 2, verse 20. Well, I'm going to read 17 through 21, again, to give that larger context instead of just taking one piece of scripture and just twisting it out of context. Actually, I'm going to move up a little bit more than that. This is when Peter addresses the crowd. Then Peter stood up with the 11, raised his voice, and addressed the crowd. "Fellow Jews and all of you who live in Jerusalem, let me explain this to you. Listen carefully to what I say. These people are not drunk, as you suppose. It's only 9 in the morning. No, this is what was spoken by the prophet Joel. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. I will show wonders in the heavens above and the signs of the earth below, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." We're going to take a close look, while I'm bringing up Scripture and theology and Christian fundamental teaching. When it comes to anything astral, there's also the astrologist's perspective on things. And so let's take a look at what an astrologist. And this guy is he's been propped up by a lot of the mainstream media folks, and so he's well respected and well known amongst the astrological community.
Welcome to your Inspirational Astrology Horoscope for Saturday, April 4th, 2015. I'm astrologer David Palmer, the Leo King, here to illuminate the collective consciousness. This is my big, awesome April 2015 horoscope. This goes into a whole hour, video, audio, PowerPoint presentation, images going into what April is all about. This is called the Grand Finale Part 2. This is about this final eclipse, which is ironically today, and how it's pushing us into a whole new world. Check out my website, inclusiveastrology.com, to make your order. But before we take a look at all the planets, let's take a look at the Leo King Planet Energy Meter and understand where all the energy is for your Saturday. And I am sending you all of my love and light. I am sending you all of my best energy, and I am hoping that you have the best day ever. And I am putting the energy meter at the extreme position. Woot woot, fate train coming in. Oh, sorry, I gotta I'm putting it in my mouth. All right. Lunar eclipse in Libra, in the middle of the Pluto-Uranus square. The first thing I want to say about this is it is a grand finale. The best way to channel this to you is that the universe is definitely sending a signal that it is over. But with it ending, it has a signal that you have to pay attention to what it's been about for you. There is no question that since 2012, especially the middle of 2012, after the eclipses that happened then in the middle of May of 2012 to now, there is an extreme connection to the 3-year period you have just stepped into and experienced. What are you trying to overcome? Pluto and Uranus is about overcoming, because Pluto and Uranus are happening in Aries and Capricorn. And that's about overcoming, finding your great strength, finding your cardinal energy to move forward, to take initiative, to more importantly, take a better position. That's what Capricorn and Aries is about, getting out of the hole, moving up on the ladder. And in many ways, this is about how can you, deep inside of yourself, make the changes necessary that are extreme, that are rough, that are hard, to move forward, to step out of energy that, might have been very difficult for the last 3 years. And it all is about this North Node and Moon in Libra, where the lunar eclipse is happening. This is about finding true balance, harmony, but this is intellectual cardinal energy. This is about realizing that there are two parts to the story that you must combine together to bring together. This is about bringing union. This is about bringing harmony. This is about, more importantly though, finding the individual self to be able to have things mirror it correctly. Because all Libra is the mirror. And with a South Node in Aries, a Sun, Uranus in Aries, with Mercury as well, this lunar eclipse is about realizing that the only way to be in perfect union and perfect partnership with a lover, a job, a pet, the universe, God, is that you work on making yourself the best that you can be.
Well, he did mention that the universe has been sending us a signal, and it's an extreme connection. What are you trying to overcome? Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would probably say he's trying to overcome 7 years of President Obama's policies, especially as we saw in the last month. Intellectual cardinal energy. What is this stuff? Well, it's astrology. But now, notice here that the astrologist comes out and says, well, the universe has been sending a signal. We have a blood moon tetrad. We're in number 3. There's some prophecy here. We have Israel, we have Iran getting the nuclear agreement just the other day. I don't know, is this a sign? Something to keep watching, keep an eye on. However, there are some who do say that this whole blood moon tetrad is a hoax. So let's take a look at the next clip, and we'll see. I'll let you weigh in as to whether or not you think this whole thing is legitimate or not.
There's been a lot of attention recently about the so-called blood moon theory, originally conceived by Mark Biltz of El Shaddai Ministries. In fact, as we speak, John Hagee's book, 4 Blood Moons, which is basically a retelling of Biltz's theory, sits on top of Amazon's bestseller list. Let me first explain what this theory is for those of you that haven't heard it yet. Joel 2:31 says, "The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord come." Mark Biltz wondered if this verse could simply be referring to a lunar and solar eclipse. Following his curiosity, he went to the NASA Eclipse website, which has a compiled list of all lunar and solar eclipses dating from 2000 BC to 3000 AD. Using the NASA site, Biltz saw that there were a number of solar and lunar eclipses in the future. The ones he focused in on were the lunar tetrads. This means a series of 4 lunar eclipses within a space of about 2 years. Biltz then compared the dates of these tetrads against the Jewish calendar. He discovered that many of these tetrads, as well as other solar eclipses, fall on Jewish feast days. Biltz wondered if such occurrences had happened in the past. He found 6 occasions in history that the lunar eclipse tetrads have coincided with Jewish feast days. Cross-referencing these dates with Jewish historical events, Biltz claimed the following connections between these tetrads and significant events in Jewish history. For example, he says that the tetrad that occurred in 1493 through 1494 corresponded with the Spanish Inquisition. He says that the tetrad that occurred in 1949 through 1950 corresponded with the 1948 War of Independence. And he says that the tetrad that occurred in 1967 through 1968 corresponded with the Six-Day War. Biltz and John Hagee suggest that because, according to this model, significant events in Jewish history have transpired around the time of blood moon tetrads, the upcoming blood moon tetrad of 2014 and 2015 will herald significant events related to biblical prophecy, citing that these eclipses are fulfilling the sun, moon, and star signs in the Bible. The question is, how does this theory bear up against biblical scrutiny and common sense? The answer is not very good, and the following are just a few reasons why. The first thing we need to critique is that what is being described by Biltz and Hagee is the same thing as what the Bible describes. The Bible speaks of the so-called sun, moon, and star sign several times. Here is an example from Revelation 6:12 through 13. And I beheld, and when he opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. Also from Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Examining the full texts about this event show that in addition to the sun and moon going dark, the stars also go dark. The Bible describes this sign as a global darkness that covers the whole planet. Whatever this is, it will not simply make the sun and moon go dark, but also the stars in the sky. This is obviously something more than an eclipse. If I were to guess, it would have to be something in the atmosphere that blocks out the entire sky altogether. Or it could be a supernatural event that causes this universal darkness. The only way that Biltz and Hagee seem to get around this is by quoting Joel 2:31 most often, because in that verse only the sun and moon are mentioned. However, if you look 21 verses before this, you will see that Joel also intended his readers to know that the stars would go dim as a result of this event as well. Joel 2:10 says, "The earth shall quake before them, the heavens shall tremble, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining." It is also made crystal clear by God in Ezekiel 32:7 through 8 that universal darkness is what is meant here. It says, "And when I shall put thee out, I will cover the heaven, and make the stars thereof dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give her light. All the bright lights of heaven will I make dark over thee, and set darkness upon the land, saith the Lord God." So unless Biltz and Hagee want to try to explain how these eclipses will make all the stars and every other light in the sky dark at the same time, then they should admit that what they're talking about is not the same thing as what the Bible is predicting. We also see from the other mentions of this event that it includes an earthquake. And as we've seen, John called it a great earthquake. Joel said, quote, "The earth shall quake before them." This is the same problem. This great earthquake is an integral part of the so-called sun, moon, and star sign. There is nothing about an eclipse, even 4 of them, that would cause an earthquake. In addition, it should be obvious to anyone reading the verses that we have quoted that these events occur simultaneously, on the same day and at the same time. And it's literally impossible for a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse to occur simultaneously. All you have to do is look at why and how these eclipses occur, and you'll see that.
Well, I wanted to interrupt there simply because he just mentioned a very plausible thing about earthquakes. And I just pulled up earthquake.usgs.gov. And there are 20 earthquakes in the map area for today, as I just bumped something and messed that up. There we go. Dallas, if you can put the computer back up on the monitor. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. But anyhow, we had 2.6 magnitude, 2.6 magnitude, 3.1, 2.8, 3.4, 4.2, 3.0, 2.7, 3.7, 2.7, 3.4, 3.7, 2.7, 3.0, 2.9, 3.7. There's nothing really significant of earthquakes that have occurred today. As a matter of fact, there's really been nothing that's been that significant in the last 30 days. As I go on the last one, we did have a 7.5 on the 29th of March around Papua New Guinea. That was the most significant one that we've had, but we haven't had anything, newsworthy even. So maybe this could be a false flag. But the bottom line really comes down to this, and I'm actually going to read it out of Matthew chapter 24, starting with verse 36. But about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And then they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you must also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. And I think that's the whole message of the blood moon tetrads. That's the whole message of the end times. I do know a lot of my fellow Christians who do come out and spend a little bit too much worrying about the end times, because I really think that what this really is a message for each and every one of us that we need to be ready at a moment's notice. The faith should not be predicated on man's interpretation of prophecy. It's definitely misplaced. You go back to the scriptures. The whole thing talks about being obedient to God, to loving our fellow man. That's how we live in harmony. And see, as we're right now on Holy Saturday, as we air this program right now, on Holy Saturday, yesterday was Good Friday, tomorrow is Easter. So I think today was probably a great day to talk about the blood moon tetrad. And one other thing I will mention on the blood moon tetrad, it should come as no surprise that these conjunctions line up, because the Jewish calendar and the feast days, Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles, occur based upon a lunar calendar. So it's going to have a conjunction. But what this should be is everybody should be ready. Everybody should be waiting for that day, because it could happen. But I don't think we need to be waiting for the day like in the film Independence Day, when they had a Martian party in Las Vegas on top of the stratosphere, where they're all, hey, yeah, we're going to have a party, it's the end of the world, and then they just got blown up. No, I'm not saying that in any means. I think if we are ready individually, we don't have to worry about when the end times are here. We should not have fear. But we shouldn't be sitting here waiting for it. It's going to happen when it happens. I don't know if God is sending us a message through blood moon tetrad. I don't know. But then again, if he wanted me to know, he would have told me that. So I think the message that we're going to leave you here is that Easter celebrates Christ's resurrection from the dead. And so I want to take this moment and this day to remember why we celebrate Easter. It's time to have a renewal, a personal faith renewal, because we can't really worry about what our fellow man is doing if we're not with it. So please take a time to realize the reason for Easter. And with that, we'll see you next week.